Hello, everyone. Welcome to Salt Hill Pub. My name is Vicki Schwegler, and I am the Area 1 Vice Chair for the New Hampshire State Republican Party. And I would like to introduce you today to Governor Christie. This is actually his second time here to Hanover, New Hampshire. He was here in 2011 when he was endorsing Governor Romney at the time for President of the United States. So let's give a big hand welcoming Governor Christie.
All right. Thank you. There's nothing going on campus tonight, is there? No, I didn't think so. First of all, thank all of you for coming. It's an overwhelming crowd. I really appreciate you being here. All the folks, especially the students from Dartmouth who are here, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Because the slogan of our campaign and the way we operate is telling it like it is, I have to start off with an honest admission to the students here at Dartmouth. I have a son who's a Princeton Tiger. See, I wanted to get it out of the way up front, okay? He's a senior at Princeton, and on the Princeton baseball team. And so you all gave him a pretty good beating last year in baseball when they came to play Dartmouth. So if you like me, a little mercy on him this spring, okay, when they come back. But I thank you so much, all of you, for coming today. Bring greetings from my wife, Mary Pat, too, who was with me the last couple of days. She had to pop off at this point and go home to see the kids and take care of them. Leaving our 15-year-old son alone on a Friday night, ill-advised. So she headed home. I'm going to be staying here working in New Hampshire the rest of tonight, of course, and then tomorrow as well. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I want to talk about just one thing off the top. Oh, man, look, I'm on TV. Hey, look at that guy. Unbelievable. No damn idea what I'm saying, but yeah, no, it says that I'm not going to be on the main debate stage on Tuesday night. Yeah, you know what? This is what I said when the media asked me about this today. I said, there's been lots of things said about me over time. The fact that I don't make an impression was never one of them. So we'll be debating Tuesday night, and we will make an impression, and I guarantee you they'll all be talking about us on Wednesday morning. You can take that to the bank. So here's what I want to talk to you about, and then I want to get to the rest of the time to your questions. You never know what's going to make an impression in a presidential campaign. I can guarantee you that. You listen to folks, you listen to lots of questions, and you try in the talks that you give to be addressing things that people are concerned about. But more than that, you also want to be talking about things that come directly from your heart. Because more than any proposals we make, when you're electing a president of the United States, you have to know what that person really believes and what they're willing to fight for and what their character is. For the last 20 years of my life, I've been working on the issue of addiction. I started 20 years ago at a adolescent inpatient drug treatment facility in New Jersey called Daytop Village. I became a board member there a couple of years later. And the guy who started that treatment center was a guy named Father Joe Hennon, and a wonderful Catholic priest who believed, as I do, that drug and alcohol addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. And that we need to give folks the tools that they have to treat their disease, to help them save their lives and bring value back to their lives. When I was starting there 20 years ago, I met a young man during that period of time after I started on the board there, who was brought in addicted to heroin, had been arrested a few times, and was ultimately given an ultimatum by a judge. He said, you're either going to state prison or you're going to Daytop Village. Even then, this young man was a little bit reluctant about going to Daytop Village, but he went. And it's a 1-year intensive inpatient program. And Father Hennon was such a visionary on this that he raised money not only to build this treatment facility, but to build a school too, so that the young people who would come there would not fall behind on their education. So while they were getting their intensive inpatient treatment, they had to spend hours a day in class to continue on their studies so he could move them towards getting their high school degree. So I met this young man, and he was an extraordinary person and went through the treatment program successfully, got his high school degree from the Daytop Village School, went on to Rutgers University, and then after that, I met him again a number of years later when he was a second-year law student at Cardozo Law School in New York. And I went back as U.S. Attorney to Daytop Village to speak at an event for the kids who were there. And he was back there helping. And he came up and reintroduced himself to me. And I said, geez, what are you doing now? And he said, well, I'm actually in my second year at Cardozo Law School. And I said, well, what are you doing this summer? And he said, well, I don't know, I'm looking for a job. And he said, so I'm looking for internships over the summer. And I said, well, good, why don't you come work for me at the U.S. Attorney's Office? And he said to me, Mr. Christie, you know I have a criminal record. And I looked at him and I said, committing crimes now, are you? Like you're currently hot? And he said to me, no, sir, of course not. And I said, well, good, then you come work for me. This young man came there and worked that summer, and it's a very competitive program to get into. And the culmination of the summer is that the students do a moot court in the federal courthouse in front of a real federal judge with lawyers from the U.S. Attorney's Office as their jury and as their witnesses. And they prep these folks, and they do this moot court trial. He became the lead lawyer for the defense in the moot court, and he got his guy acquitted. And he got the award for the best intern of the summer. He then went on to graduate. He worked at a big law firm in New York, and I'm not surprised later on to find out that he went off and started his own firm. He's got his own firm now, a couple people working for him, doing criminal defense work in New York City. This was a young man who was near death, whose parents had no hope. He was ready to go to state prison rather than be treated. When I looked in his eyes, there was no life in those eyes. Heroin had drained the life from him. Because he went and got treatment and took it seriously and had people who cared him and loved him, cared about him and loved him, he reclaimed his life. Father Hennon told me the reason to get involved in Daytop when he was first pitching me to get involved as a 33-year-old new father. He said, Chris, the reason you want to be involved here is because Daytop Village is a place where miracles happen on earth. And he's so right. Treatment for drug and alcohol addiction can lead to miracles on earth. And this young man's a miracle on earth. And when I became governor, Daytop Village decided to honor me and Mary Pat for the work that we've done for them over all these years. And I had no idea they were going to do this. They honored me. I knew that. I showed up at the dinner. And they said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to bring out our presenter for the award to the governor and Mrs. Christie. And lo and behold, out from behind the curtain, out he walked. And when he stood up there, he said to me, he said to the audience, he said, there are two things that saved my life: Daytop Village and Governor Christie. Well, all I can tell you is that of all the different honors or things that I've been able to earn in my life, there's no greater moment for me as a public official than that moment. And I got that picture in my office at the State House, and that young man is still a friend of mine. And we need to understand that behind those lifeless eyes, behind the denial and the anger and the bitterness that comes along with drug and alcohol addiction, that behind those eyes are people like that. Someone who now is bringing great value to his family, to his friends, to his profession, to his clients. That's why I tell people, that when I say I'm pro-life for the whole life. It's easy to be pro-life for the 9 months they're in the womb. They've done nothing to disappoint us yet, right? In the womb, they're pretty good. They come out and they're live human beings, and they make decisions and choices and things that we may not agree with and that at times disappoint us and at times anger us and at times scare us. But we got to be pro-life for the 16-year-old addicted teenage girl on the floor of the county lockup. We got to be pro-life for that young man who was 17 when he came into Daytop Village, nearly had killed himself, had stolen money from his mother, his father, his grandmother, broke and entered into homes across his neighborhood to steal money to feed his addiction. He's now a successful practicing lawyer with a great life. We need to be talking about this as a country. The scourge of drug addiction and the deaths that come from it, it's fixable. It's fixable, but we got to treat it as a disease and not as some moral failing. And that's why, this video that we put out, that we didn't put out, Huffington Post put out, from a town hall meeting I did here in New Hampshire. They put it up last Friday. It's 5.5 minutes or so long. It's long by internet standards. And when I walked in today, right before I walked in, I checked on there, on the Huffington Post and Facebook site. Since last Friday to this Friday, 6.8 million views of that video. That doesn't say anything about me. It says something about what the American people think of this problem. They're scared, and they want help and want answers. And we got to take the stigma away from this. That's why in that video I talk about my mom, who was addicted to smoking, and who after over 55 years of smoking, eventually got lung cancer, and it killed her. And no one ever said to me when my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, well, listen, she's known since 1964 in the Surgeon General's report that smoking was bad for her and could cause lung cancer, and she continued to smoke, so she made a choice and she got what she deserved, Chris. We're not going to treat her. No chemotherapy, no radiation, no medication. Let her die because she made a choice and she got what she deserved. No one said that to me, nor would you think of saying it to a friend who got cancer because they smoked. I watched my mother with gum and patches and hypnosis and all kinds of things to try to quit smoking, and she just couldn't quit. It was a disease. She was addicted to nicotine. We got to understand that everybody makes bad choices, right? I can't imagine that there's a person in this bar tonight that hasn't made a bad choice. In fact, when I look at some of you, you're on your way to bad choices tonight. Really bad choices. That tomorrow morning you'll wake up and go, I can't believe I did that. Did I do that? Right? We've all made bad choices, all of us. The lucky thing is that we didn't make a bad choice about drugs. Because if we did, we could become an addict like that. So if we've all made bad choices that we look back on and say, I'd do it differently, why are we penalizing those people who made the bad choice regarding drugs? We need to embrace them. As long as they don't commit violent acts, as long as they're not dealing drugs to other people to poison them, we need to embrace these folks and tell them that we're going to help them. And then it's up to them. Then it's up to them to use the help we give them. And so we need a president who's going to stand up and say that to lower the stigma that goes along with this disease. Because no one's afraid anymore to say that their husband or wife, their mom or dad, their sister or brother has cancer. But how reluctant are people to say, I have a son or daughter or husband or wife who are addicted to drugs? Because somehow we think it reflects on us. It doesn't. We got to let go of that. I can't believe that when I walked in here, I got met by a couple who lost their son to a drug overdose this week. And they saw the video and they came up to me. and said, thank you for what you're saying, what you're talking about. We lost our son this week to a heroin overdose, 23 years old. I have 4 children, 22, 19, 15, and 12. I so admire those people. I don't know how I'd put one foot in front of the other if I lost one of my children. I don't know. I assume I would, but I couldn't tell you how. Those folks need to know that we're going to work harder as a country to make sure that there are not more folks like their son. Because I end that video by saying, there but for the grace of God go I. And man, every one of us should say it. There but for the grace of God go I. There but for the grace of God, I didn't make that decision. And we need as a country to do better. So we're going to talk about that a lot in this campaign. We've been talking about it a lot. We're going to continue to. It's not about the deficit, and it's not about entitlements, and it's not about national defense or terrorism. And I talk about all those things. You'll ask me questions about them. But this goes into every home in America. Either the actual problem of addiction or the outright fear that addiction will come into your house next. And none of us want to see that. So the uplifting part of this, of course, at the end is it's fixable, everybody. We just got to be committed to fixing it and committed to taking it out of the shadows. If we do that, we're doing a real service to each other and to our country. It'll make us a better place, a happier place, a more productive place with more intact families and more productive members of our society. So here's the way the town hall works with me, and all candidates do it a little bit differently. Mine's very complicated. You raise your hand, I call on you, you ask me a question. Okay? You don't have to write your question down beforehand and give it to my staff and have them review it to see if it's a question I actually like or don't like, and then I get only the easy ones. No, I call on you. The only thing we don't do here is we don't respond to yelled out questions. Here's why. It's not because I'm the governor of New Jersey and not because I'm a candidate for president of the United States. It's because I'm a father of 4. And I've become acutely trained at ignoring things that are yelled at me, right? We all do as parents. So that I don't respond to, but everything else I do respond to. I hope you don't mind, but now that I'm really getting down to work, I'm going to take my coat off, and we're going to get down to work. So let's go. This gentleman right here.
Governor, hello?
Yep, you got it. It's good.
Hello. Well, it's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have you here, and I can imagine this is a thankless job. But from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate what you have done and the efforts that you have put in this campaign, because it's a big deal, and I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you.
I got a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask you one.
Okay.
The islands in the South China Sea.
Yes, sir.
At the end of the day, we can argue about whether or not we should have gone into the Middle East, but I think it was a bad decision. It's seeming to prove out that it's a bad decision. We are not what we used to be in a lot of ways. I'm not sure that the Americans are ready for war. Why should we care about these islands? This is off the coast of China, much closer than we are. This is halfway around the world. And where are we going with this, essentially? Because, on the other hand, we shouldn't be muscle flexing, or should we? I mean, this is a defining moment, I think, and this is a symbolism that I think needs to be addressed.
Sure, I'll give you my opinion on it. For those of you who don't know, China is in the midst of building artificial islands in the South China Sea, well away from its coast, much closer to territorial waters of other countries in that region of the world. And they're not building them to put luxury hotels on them. They're building them with airstrips that'll be able to be used for military activity. Here's why we should care. Why we should care is because the free flow of commerce through the South China Sea, Asia being one of our biggest trading partners, not only China, but Japan and Taiwan and South Korea. The free flow of trade through the South China Sea, uncontrolled by anyone, is what the United States should want. Vigorous trade with that area of the world helps to create jobs here and helps to create economic activity there. We have a good reason to suspect the Chinese would like to control that, and that putting military operations on those islands could threaten that ability to do that. I don't think we need to go to war over this, I think a little muscle flexing would be fine. The president just decided to do this finally by sending some ships within 12 miles of the islands and flying some missions over the islands. Someone asked me this when the president was unwilling to do it about 6 weeks ago. What would you do? And I said, I'd fly Air Force One over it. Just so they understood we meant business. Because our allies in that area need to know we're going to stand with them. And I think if the Chinese understood that, okay, you're going a little far here, they don't want a war with us either. But they need to know, and this has been the problem, one of the problems from a foreign policy perspective with this president, in my opinion. They need to know the limits of our patience. Our adversaries need to know the limits of our patience. They need to know when, we're not going to get involved in every little thing going on in your part of the world, inside your country even. But there are limits to our patience. And you building islands in the South China Sea as an attempt to stage military exercises and operations there that could, if you wanted to, impede the free flow of commerce there, or essentially ransom the people in that area for what they'll have to do or pay to be able to have the free flow of commerce, that's not good for the world, it's not good for the United States. So I think the United States has to, in a very direct and blunt way with the Chinese, say, okay, no, not this one. Back off a little bit. Let's be smart. You need us more than we need you. And so let's not get ourselves into that kind of thing. See, I think that aggressiveness in that respect, in terms of your language and your approach, is going to be good in what the world's going to need after 7 years of this president, who lots of times you can't understand exactly what he means or what he's willing to fight for. There's lots of things that have been said about me over time. Lots of things. Misunderstood has never been one of them. People understand what I say and what I mean when I say it. And the president of China would understand too. I want to work with you. I want us to have a peaceful coexistence in the world. I want us to help each other economically. I want us to help the rest of the world economically. And I don't want to have a conflict with you militarily. But don't steal my lunch money. Okay? Don't do petty, stupid things that can lead to conflict. And I think what they're doing in the South China Sea is a petty, stupid thing that they need to be told it's time to stop. And I think if you do that, they'll understand. They have bigger fish to fry as well. And we should, but like anything else in life, you let the bully steal your lunch money every day, he's going to keep stealing your lunch money until you stop him. So that's what we need to do, I think, and that's the way I would deal with that problem. All right, in the back, right there. Yes, sir. Yep.
Hi, Governor Christie.
It'll turn on. They're a little slow.
My name's Andrew Wolf. I'm a sophomore at Dartmouth College. I'm a New Jersey native. I'm a huge fan of yours. My question is, in August, Dodd-Frank turned 5, and a lot of the other candidates made a lot of speeches about either repealing, replacing, or reforming it. My question is, what is your plan for financial regulatory architecture to address it?
Yeah. Listen, here's what you get to learn as a governor. Hey guys, don't turn mine up, just turn his on, you know? I mean, like, here's what you get to learn as a governor. You know what Dodd-Frank, the biggest and worst thing Dodd-Frank has done? It's closing community banks across this country. Because the level of regulation that's being placed on these community banks is the same level of regulation they're placing on Citibank and JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Listen, that level of regulation on those banks, the too big to fail banks, I'm okay with that. You know, they have to comply because of what happened to the economy in 2008, because of a lot of bad decisions in the banking industry. That should not apply to small community banks, state chartered banks across this country. And the big problem, of course, with those banks closing is that's where most of our small businesses in this country get their capital. They don't get it from Citibank or Bank of America. They go to the local bank on the corner where the banker knows them. But these regulations have so intimidated the local bankers from putting these loans on the books, they just say no. And that's causing our economy not to be able to grow as much as it should. And it's hurting small businesses throughout this country that need access to capital to be able to get things done the right way. So what I'd say to you is on our structure, it would be to keep a very close eye on the too big to fail banks, because the impact they can have on the overall economy in our country. but to get rid of Dodd-Frank for the small community banks. It doesn't make sense. Let the states regulate those small community banks. They don't have the kind of heft that would bring down the American economy, but they do have the kind of heft that can build the American economy neighborhood by neighborhood by neighborhood, and we should let them do that. So that's the way it would look with me and Dodd-Frank. I want to make sure I don't ignore the people behind me. Yes, young man right there.
Thank you. I'm presuming you know of the quagmire we've gone into in Syria. And I'm presuming you know of the Kurds who have been fighting for their lives and homeland in both Iraq and Syria. So I guess my question to you is, would you support an independent Kurdistan?
Listen, first thing we need to do is to support the Kurds. I'm not even doing that. Before we get to an independent Kurdistan, we've got to support the Kurds. And they have been amongst our most loyal allies in that region of the world. The Kurds, along with the Israelis, have been amongst our most loyal allies in that part of the world. So we need to support the Kurds, we need to arm them, and make sure that they have the weaponry and the training they need to be able to protect themselves. That's the first thing. We need a much bigger, larger solution in the Middle East, as you imply in your question, by calling Syria a quagmire. And I think you're right, it's worse than a quagmire, it's probably an inferno. Because now you have the Russians, the Iranians, and God, unbelievable, the Cubans. The Cubans are in Syria at the invitation of the Russians, our new friends from Cuba, who the president has normalized relations with for nothing in return. What's the first act of friendship that Cuba extends? To send troops to prop up the murderer Assad in Syria. Should we be surprised that the Castros stuck it to us? Only this president is surprised. Only this president thinks that every good thing that comes out of his mouth will be returned with a wonderful response. I mean, there's only 14 months left, man. Wake up. Wake up and look at the world. He invited Putin into Syria after he drew the red line and said, if Assad uses chemical weapons on his people, we will take him out. That's what the President of the United States said. We will take him out. So then Assad uses chemical weapons on his people, and the President of the United States says, never mind. Let me bring Putin in here to see if he can negotiate something for us. I mean, seriously. You're gonna voluntarily bring Vladimir Putin into this thing? I mean, it's incredible, but he did. And now what do we have? Now we have Russian troops and Russian hardware in Syria for the first time in 40 years. We've kept Russia and the old Soviet Union out of the Middle East for 40 years after the Yom Kippur War, we made an agreement with Egypt. Now they're back. And they bring the Cubans and the Iranians with them. What a great neighborhood. What a great neighborhood, right? And all these folks are friends of the president's. The mullahs in Iran, our new friend that he made a nuclear agreement with. The Cubans, now we've got diplomatic relations with them, and John Kerry goes down there and raises the flag. Think whatever you want about George W. Bush, but when you watch John Kerry be the Secretary of State, aren't there many of you saying, like, good miss, man, good miss in 2004 with John Kerry? And so in Syria, what we need to do is first to set up a no-fly zone to protect those rebels. Remember something, Assad has killed 250,000 of his own people. And millions more are running for their lives from their own government to parts unknown in Europe and in other parts of the Middle East to try to save their lives and the lives of their family, leaving home, leaving their fortune back in Syria. Need to set up a no-fly zone, and the first phone call I would make after the no-fly zone would be to President Putin. I'd say, Mr. President, good talking to you. You may have seen me on TV. I'm the new President of the United States. We have a no-fly zone in Syria, and it applies to you as well. And I said this on CNN, and someone on CNN said to me, well, what would you do if you flew the plane into the no-fly zone after you warned them? I said, shoot it down. That's what I would do. You'd shoot down a Russian plane? I said, well, I warned him. I said, it's a no-fly zone. Don't come in. If he came in, he'd get shot down. And let me guarantee you something, it's the last time he'd fly in. You get shot down once, you go, oh, this guy's serious. We need to make sure, again, in response to this gentleman's question, that they know the limits of our patience. Don't just, do a preemptive attack. That's wrong. Warn them. Tell them. I don't want conflict. But if you're going to bring it, then I'm going to respond. And that's the way you bring some more order back to the world, not by being the world's policeman, but by letting folks know, here are the parameters of acceptable and unacceptable conduct with the United States. And what's going on in Syria right now is an inferno. And we didn't even mention ISIS. And that, of course, was the group that this brilliant president called the JV. The JV. I don't think anybody's calling ISIS the JV anymore. In fact, his own counterterrorism coordinator says they are the single biggest terrorist threat to the United States and its citizens. No longer the JV, everybody. Now we got a ball game. And if he would have acted quickly and early, we might not have had a ball game. Now we got a full-blown ball game with these people. And, acting, the difference between this president and me would be, this president thinks that inaction is always the preferable course regarding foreign policy. And I don't think that's the default position. It doesn't have to be and it shouldn't be. Next one. All right. This young man right here.
So it seems like of the Republican field, it's probably you and Governor Pataki that are willing to acknowledge that man-made climate change is a serious issue. What do you think's going on with the rest of the Republicans? Why are they unwilling to admit we have a problem?
Well, let me be really clear about what my position is so that nobody misunderstands it. I believe climate change is real. Now, the climate has changed forever, and it's still changing, and it will always change. And I believe that human activity contributes to it, because I believe that everything we do on Earth contributes to what's going on in our environment. Everything that we do contributes to it. So I don't believe these are groundbreaking ideas. Now, the question is, what do you do in response to it? Now, I'll tell you what we do in New Jersey. New Jersey now, as of last year, 2014, we've already reached our clean air goals for 2020. Already. How? In the most densely populated state in America, how do we meet our goals? First is that 53% of New Jersey's electricity is produced by nuclear. Probably didn't know that. In the most densely populated state in America, we have for decades been operating safely nuclear reactors in our state that produce 53% of our electricity and contribute no pollution to our environment. Listen, everybody, 3 Mile Island was a long time ago. I was in high school when 3 Mile Island happened. That's a long time ago. And we need to get over it. We can safely operate nuclear in this country. We regulate it, we can safely operate it, and it will help on the issues of putting pollution into our skies. Second, if you hang around here tonight, you won't be able to do it here because everybody will hear it, but go to, I'm sure there's a few other bars here in Hanover, none as nice as this one, but a few other ones in Hanover, and when you go there, ask somebody if they can name, for beer, the top 3 solar producing states in America. They'll get the first 2 with no problem. California and Arizona, right? Easy. Big states, out west, lots of sunshine, easy. Number 3, New Jersey. New Jersey is the 3rd largest producer of solar energy in America. Why? How did it happen? Because we partnered with the private sector in New Jersey, the government did, to say, let's make this affordable. Let's make it affordable and attractive to people. And now, if you go across New Jersey, you'll see on private homes, on factories, on office buildings, at bus stops, in the fronts of office buildings, huge solar arrays all over the place. And people are using solar energy to help supply their electricity. Enormously helpful for environmental reasons as well. We've moved away from coal. We still have some coal in New Jersey, but not a lot. And we're building 3 new natural gas-fired plants in New Jersey. Natural gas is very easy to access for us now, given the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, and it's a cleaner burning fossil fuel than coal. Now, we need to do this in the country. We need to do the things that make economic sense. Do we need to drill for more oil? Yes, we do. Do we need to explore for more natural gas? Yes, we do. But we also need to give each state the opportunity to do what works for their state from a renewable energy perspective. When I'm in Iowa, I drive through the roads of Iowa, you see wind turbines everywhere. They're everywhere in Iowa. Because they're a big, flat, open space. And it goes for miles and miles and miles of wind turbines. They've made that affordable. It works in Iowa. That makes sense. Let Iowa make that decision. Wind turbines in New Jersey won't be any good. See, we're the most densely populated state in America. We get 8.9 million people in a little space. Not only would birds start getting killed, people might start getting killed. We're very edgy there, and we're on top of each other, and the whole wind turbine thing on land wouldn't work for us. But I think the way you need to acknowledge what's going on in the world is to do that and not do a cap and trade kind of program where we're just taxing the American people, making them less competitive with the rest of the world, and not accomplishing much of anything from that. For some of you who have traveled to China, you know that there are days in China when people walk around with surgical masks on. Because the pollution in China is so bad that they can't walk around the streets without a surgical mask. We're not going to fix this problem by ourselves. The last thing I would do as president is to sit down with the Chinese and say, okay, let's get serious about climate change. Let's get serious about the way we're polluting our planet. And let's talk about how we're going to deal with this. And we'll see, because we can't do this on our own. China's the second biggest economy in the world. They are burning a lot of coal and other fossil fuel. And we need to sit down and have a conversation with them about whether they're really interested in doing something different. Because if they're not, we're not going to be able to deal with the problem on our own. Us and our European friends are not going to be able to do it. So let's do a practical way inside the country for us to be competitive, not raise our taxes, but make these things competitive and available to folks. And we got to reopen our minds about nuclear, everybody. If we don't, we're leaving a big, non-polluting option for energy production on the table, and I don't think it makes sense. Yeah, why not? You're right. That's. Oh, no. Take it too close.
Thank you very much, Governor. So we've covered domestic policy, a bit about foreign policy. One thing that we haven't really addressed, and it's kind of a side issue, is space policy going forward. We saw under George W. Bush a lot of investment in NASA, a lot of consideration to when we're going to go back to the moon, when we're gone to Mars. But with under the Obama administration, we've seen 2 straight budgets where NASA's had their budget completely slashed. What would be your space policy going forward, especially considering the great leaps that companies like SpaceX and United Launch Alliance have made over the last 3 to 4 years?
You know, it becomes a much bigger issue for everybody, I think, because of the great role that space can play in our economy, and their need for us to be able to get satellites in the air, to be able to do the things that need to be done. We're contracting a lot of that out, as you know now, from NASA. Here's the thing. It's about choices, everybody. It's about choices. This is why I'm the only person who's put forward an entitlement reform plan in this campaign. Nobody wants to talk about it. Let me tell you why we have to talk about it if we want to have any money to invest in space. Because 71% of the federal budget today is spent on entitlements and debt service. 71% on entitlements and debt service. Now, just to give you a comparison, when John Kennedy ran for president in 1960, 55 years ago, the total spending on entitlements and debt service in the federal budget was 26%. In half a century, we've totally inverted those numbers. From 26% on things that we're spending looking in the rearview mirror to 71% of what we're spending looking in the rearview mirror. That's bad news for space. That's bad news for the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation. That's bad news for our national defense. That's bad news for education. Because everything else that we spend all this time talking about the 29%, and space is one of those. We spend no time talking about the 71%. During the first debate, they raised this issue with me, and you had Governor Huckabee say that we didn't need to change Social Security or Medicare at all, and that he was going to fix the problem. Now, these are his words, not mine. By setting up a tax plan that was going to tax pimps and prostitutes. Now, I got to tell you, when you imagine running for President of the United States and being on stage for a major national televised debate, you never really think that the word pimp or prostitute is going to really come up. But it did. Listen, I've traveled the whole country. I've been to 49 of our 50 states. Only Alaska remains unscathed. And I will tell you, watching what's going on out there, there are not enough pimps and prostitutes. to pay taxes, to fix the Social Security and Medicare problem. So if someone wants to know later, I can go into the details of the entitlement reform problem. But my point to you is that we got to make choices. The entitlement reform plan I put forward will save $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. That will allow us to make those programs secure, but also free up significant dollars to be able to invest in science and technology and innovation, which NASA is part of, and which I think we need to do, because it keeps America on the cutting edge of what's going on around the world. We need to do that. But it's going to be about choices. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you I'm going to spend money on NASA unless you're going to buy into my entitlement reform program. You know, there's going to be no free lunch in the Christie administration. Sorry, we're already $19 trillion in debt. I'm coming in when the credit card is more than maxed out, so we can't keep putting more money on it. And so that would be my answer on it. We buy into entitlement reform, it's going to free up money to do lots of other things. If we don't, we're just going to continue to paddle along, spending all our money on what's in the rearview mirror. And by the way, that's when interest rates are at zero. When interest rates start to go up, what do you think the debt service is going to look like? It's going to be real bad. So that's my answer on NASA. I'd like to do it, but I can only do it if I can do it responsibly and do it by making sure that we do some other things in the budget that we need to do, especially dealing with entitlements. All right. This guy right here, stand up.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Governor, for coming today. I'm also a fellow New Jerseyan as well.
Excellent.
And I wanted to also ask you about banking reform as well, specifically about the big banks. You talked about how Dodd-Frank was okay for some of the larger banks, but I wanted to specifically ask you about the Volcker rule and about proprietary trading and whether you think that rule hurts the American economy and our competitiveness.
I do. And I think, listen, my general philosophy is that we should let the markets work. Now, what you need to do with that, though, is also have aggressive law enforcement, right? You know, because there are folks, by the way, and this administration did nothing about it, there are folks who broke the law during that crisis, and nobody was ever prosecuted. I mean, that offends me as a former United States attorney. I prosecuted a bunch of corporate executives when I was U.S. attorney. Because if they break the law, they lie to the public and they lie to the shareholders, they need to go to jail. They need to go to jail. And so, you know, the fact is that none of these folks were prosecuted, and what that sets up is one of two choices: either a completely lawless society, or it invites government in to heavily regulate. That's not good for our economy, and that's what we're talking about with the Volcker rule. So, you know, from my perspective, we'd be much better off letting the markets operate and have aggressive law enforcement against those folks who decide to paint outside the lines. And we had a bunch of that, and nothing happened. And what that also makes the American people feel, the real folks out there, it makes them feel like the system's rigged for the rich. And it's hard to argue against that at the moment when you saw what happened in the light of the banking crisis. So we got a lot of work to do in that regard, but I would start off by putting forward the name of a really aggressive, no-nonsense attorney general who was going to not care which party you were in or what kind of outfit you wore, but you were going to be prosecuted based on what you did. That justice was going to be more than just a word. It was going to be a way of life. I remember telling my prosecutors when I was U.S. attorney, when we would bring a case and we'd lose it. It didn't happen very often, but it happened. And they would come back and apologize to me. I'd say, Chris, I'm really sorry we lost this one. I'd say, let me ask you a question. Come on over here into the conference room. In the conference room, there was a podium there with the seal of our department. I said, read what that seal says. And this one young prosecutor said, it says Department of Justice. I said, right, it doesn't say Department of Prosecution. It says Department of Justice. Sometimes justice is an acquittal. Our job is to do justice. And that's the kind of attorney general I want. Someone who understands that justice needs to apply to everyone. It needs not just be a word, but it's not the Department of Prosecution. It's the Department of Justice. And you need an attorney general and a president who understands that. That's the way I approach it. All right. Let's see, let's go all the way to the back. This guy all the way in the back there.
Yes, Governor, thanks for coming to Hanover.
Whoa, hey, how you doing?
Thanks for coming to Hanover. Until tonight, I had no idea there were this many Republicans in Hanover. So
Don't jump to wild conclusions.
So I'm curious, does your progressive pro-life stance extend to capital punishment?
No, it doesn't. Here's why. Because I think there's always been exceptions for self-defense. That's why, in my position on abortion, I believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother, because I think those are acts of self-defense by women. And I think they have the right to act in their own self-defense. And I believe in the same way that when people commit murder, that the state has a right to act in self-defense. And that's why I have a different concept on capital punishment, and that's why I'm for exceptions to my pro-life stance on abortion, because I believe those are acts of self-defense. That's the way I've always looked at them. It's the way I continue to look at them. So I think it's consistent for that basis. That's always been the way our law has looked at it, and I think it's the way the law should look at it consistently now. Even further in the back, all the way in the back, red shirt, right? It looks red from here. He's obviously got fans back there. Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What is your reaction to the hundreds of thousands of people migrating out of the Middle East, and how would you handle this vast problem coming of the migrants?
Well, the first thing is to remember why it's happening. This is the cost of inaction. It's the cost of inaction. And not benign inaction. We said we were going to do something, and then we didn't do it. That's worse. If you never say you're going to do it, and then you don't do it, you might not, in retrospect, think it was the right decision, but at least you didn't promise people you were going to. These folks in Syria thought, well, when he starts using chemical weapons, the United States is going to come to our rescue, because the President of the United States said that he would. And then it happens, and they're running in part because they believe there's no hope for them to be saved by staying. So let's remember first why it's happening. They're running because we let them down. We made a promise that we didn't keep. Now, you can argue about whether we should have made the promise in the first place or not. That's a valid argument, discussion to have, but once you make it, if you're the American president, you got to keep it. Now, what would I do now? I would work with our allies in Europe and in the Middle East to make sure that there was an orderly progression of these refugees to those places, and I would help pay for setting up the appropriate types of housing and shelter for these folks. I don't think that we need to bring a lot of these refugees to the United States. I think it's fraught with danger to bring them here because I don't know how appropriately we'd be able to vet these folks and their backgrounds. But I do think that we have an international responsibility, not just because of geography, to foist this responsibility just on the folks who are nearest. And we have a role in creating this crisis as well. So I think we have a moral responsibility to help support those in other countries who are making sure that these folks are taken care of. So that's the way I would deal with it, sir. You're welcome. Let's get this young lady right here. And you can, go ahead. Yeah, it should be far enough away without the feedback.
Hi, Governor. Is it working? No.
It's not
Okay.
at the moment, but try it again.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that your home state, New Jersey, ranks third in solar electricity generation. And here in a recent poll shows that 62% of Republicans strongly support the idea of allowing homeowners who produce their own electricity to send it back to the grid and receive credit on their energy bill. But currently in New Hampshire, we have a law that caps this so-called net trade system. And it actually reduces the number of homeowners that are able to generate their own solar electricity. So I was wondering, do you think we should do more to allow homeowners and companies to sell their own electricity back to the grid and produce it?
Sure. But what you've got to make sure of is that you have a system that can support it, right? You have to have an infrastructure that can support that, because if it starts to become really popular, you've got to have a system that's going to be able to handle it. But in concept, I don't have any problem with that at all, no. See, quick, easy answer to that one. Yes, right there.
Governor, I've supported you since you beat my dad's old boss, Corzine, in your first
Hey, that was fun,
election.
beating John Corzine. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was to watch that. However, I do support you, but Congress has always been a den of vipers. And how would you wrangle, not just, frankly, the Democrats as you wrangled them in Jersey, but you have people within your own party who are a tad hard to manage. How would you frankly wrangle this hydra?
I've heard. Well, you said I want to make sure that all the media that's here, he characterized Congress as a den of vipers. So I'm just repeating his characterization. Congress may be a den of vipers. I can tell you the New Jersey State Legislature is no Easter egg hunt, okay? And so I've had training in how to deal with this. I think there are 3 steps you need to take as the executive, as the leader. The first is you have to speak very clearly, very directly, and very plainly about what it is your priorities are. There can't be any confusion about what things are most important to you. Confusion leads to chaos. Chaos leads to disorder. Disorder leads to nothing getting done. And so when you're not clear and direct about these things, when you try to be everything to everybody, you can't be. You just can't be. So first, the executive has to be clear. Second, the executive has to care about establishing relationships with the legislative branch. Now, this goes back to my old friend, Governor Tom Kean of New Jersey, who served for 8 years as governor. Was later the chairman of the 9/11 Commission. After I was elected governor, I called him and I said, Governor, can I come by and have some sessions with you during the transition for you to teach me how to be governor? And he said, sure, I'd be happy to. And so I went over for my first meeting with him. And he said, here's the way these meetings are going to work, Chris. I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them. And then I'm going to critique your answer. And that's the way you're going to learn. I went, all right, sounds fair. I said, let's go, Governor. What's the first question? He goes, who's your best friend? I said, Mary Pat. He said, not anymore. I said, not anymore. He said, your new best friend is going to be the Senate President in New Jersey, Steve Sweeney. Now, let me tell you about Steve Sweeney. Steve Sweeney is the Senate President. He's a Democrat. He's from South Jersey. And he is the president of the Iron Workers Local. Not a wallflower, everybody, and a true union guy. But what Governor Kean was saying to me was that given our system of government, you got to make friends with this guy. You got to make him your friend. And I did. Over the course of the years, we went out for dinner together. We went out for drinks together. We met each other's families. He knows Mary Pat and my kids. I know Patty and his 2 children. We've gotten to know each other and we've gotten to be friends. That does not mean we don't violently disagree at times. It does not mean that he has not said the most unspeakable things about me in public. But what it does mean is every time he comes to the State House, and I'm there too, we meet. And it means that when we sit down across a table from each other without the press there, without anybody there, he knows that if I give him my word, I'll keep it. And I know that if he gives me mine, if he gives me his, he'll keep it as well. In Washington, we don't have any of that anymore. We have people at opposite ends of the hallway in Capitol Hill yelling and screaming at each other, sending out press releases to make each other look bad. And you got a president who doesn't engage with the Congress. Step 2 is you got to engage and make these folks trust you. Not believe everything you say, not agree with everything you say, but trust you. The third thing is that you've got to be willing to act decisively when confronted with problems. What Congress wants to see more than anything else is an executive that is decisive. That takes more issues off their plate and makes their job easier. They love that. They want their jobs to be made easier. But you can't do that if you're wringing your hands and spend 7 years to wait to decide whether you should stop the Keystone Pipeline or not. Okay? 7 years. What's that do? It causes all kinds of conflict in Congress for no reason. Congress passing bills that he's vetoing, Congress yelling and arguing and screaming about Keystone. He's known for years he wasn't going to do Keystone. And he didn't do it. Played politics with it. And it creates a toxic atmosphere. So you got to be decisive. They may not like the decision you make, but then it's over. And you move on to the next thing. And that's the way you make progress in our country. So those are the 3 things that I would do to try to deal with Congress off the top of my head. Last thing I'll tell you is this. To show how disengaged this president was, he just saw a story that he, in the last 3 months, for the first time in nearly 7 years, had John Boehner on Air Force One. Now, John Boehner is the leader of the Republicans in the House for his entire presidency. And 6.5 years in is the first time you have him on Air Force One? Let's tell you how disengaged this president is with the leadership, let alone the members. I mean, let me be clear with you. I don't agree with Nancy Pelosi on almost anything. But if Nancy Pelosi is the Democratic leader of the House and I'm President of the United States, she can come on Air Force One whenever she wants. She can take the M&Ms if she wants. I don't care. Whatever she wants to do. Because here's what will happen. We won't agree on much, but every time she spends a couple hours with me on that plane, she's going to realize I'm a good person. And when I spend that time with her, I'm going to realize that she's a good and well-intentioned person also. And that helps to break down these barriers. It helps us to have a conversation. And if you're unwilling to spend that time as president, you have no business running for the job in the first place, in my opinion. I'm going to turn back around this way. See if there are questions back here. Yes, sir. I'll give you mine.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you very, very much for your bravery on dealing with entitlements. None of the other candidates have done it. We're about $100 trillion in the hole. Thank you for doing that. Question. We overwhelmingly, both parties, the American public thinks that Washington has become corrupt. It's a transactional system. Policy is bought and paid for. The average American has zero influence. What are you going to do about it?
How are you going to drain the swamp that is Washington, D.C.? A few things. First off, term limits would help a great deal, right? Part of the problem is that these folks are down there forever, and they become transactional. I don't think they're transactional the day they get there, most of them, but over time, they become transactional because they become entrenched in these jobs. So I think 12 years should be it. 6 terms in the House or 2 terms in the Senate, that's it. I mean, the president has an 8-year term limit. I have an 8-year term limit as governor of New Jersey. So that means I'm dispensable, but they're indispensable? I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, I've got a guy in my state legislature right now who has been serving in the state legislature for 43 years. Go home, man. Go home. 43 years. Are you kidding? You mean you haven't accomplished everything you came to accomplish in 1972? Still not done? I mean, he's only there to continue to serve himself. So that's the first thing. Term limits would help a great deal. Second, you got to slow down the revolving door that goes on between the executive branch and the lobbying branch. It's hard to get good people to come into government, make this financial sacrifice that if they're really good, they need to make. But they need to understand that when you make that decision to come in, you can't go right back out the door and start trading on the relationships and the information and knowledge that you have that you've obtained at the taxpayer expense. So we got to slow down that revolving door and put real limits on the number of years you have to have a cooling off period before you go and be a lobbyist in this country, because it's just destructive to people's confidence in the fact that there's any kind of level playing field. Third thing is, the hardest thing to do in politics is say no. Right? Because anybody who comes up to you most of the time is looking for you to say yes. They're asking for something. And to be popular, you want this? Sure. Yeah, this, yes, yes. We've gotten into a yes society. We need to start being a little more of a no society on that kind of thing. And that means you have to learn as a politician to become a professional ingrate. People support you, they help you, they donate money to you, and then they come to you and ask you for stuff, and unless it's in the national interest, you have to say, yeah, no, sorry. What you got was me. You didn't get your issue, you got me. And on this one, we disagree. Sorry. That's hard to do, but it's got to be done. And it's got to start with the president. And under the crazy campaign finance system we have now, it makes it even harder to do that because of the inordinate influence and secrecy often connected with campaign finance.
Do you do anything to change that system?
He's got to follow up. Yeah. What would I do to change the campaign finance system? Yeah, you know what I'd do? I'd make it completely transparent. See, what you're really, the core of what you're concerned about is, am I bought? That's really it. We talk about the influence of money. Well, what are we really talking about? We're talking about, did I get bought by somebody who gave me money? Has my integrity been purchased? Has my judgment been purchased? So let's make it easy. I think any person in any entity should be able to give any amount of money they want to any candidate, as long as it's disclosed 24 hours later on the internet. So you can go on the internet, on my website, and if I have to disclose all my contributions, you can see that one day the XYZ Corporation gave me $5 million. And let's say the XYZ Corporation is, making widgets, right? And 2 weeks later, I come out with a plan to give substantial tax incentives to widget manufacturers. Now, you got a pretty good case to think that I just got bought. That's what you really want to find out about us. And right now, under the current system with super PACs and C4s and presidential campaigns that all aren't supposed to be talking to each other and aren't, you don't know where the money's coming from, where it's going, how it's being spent. I should be responsible for every nickel that's spent on my behalf. Every nickel should come into my campaign. But what we do now is this crazy presidential system where I'm trying to communicate to 330 million people, and I have to do it raising $2,700 at a time in personal money. Listen, these campaigns are now costing $1 billion or more dollars. $2,700 a person. It's just not realistic anymore. And so make it unlimited, let them write whatever check they want to write, but 24 hours later, disclose it on the internet, and then you can judge whether my conduct has been changed, whether my rhetoric has been changed, whether my actions have been changed because someone gave me a big check. And if it has, I assume you'd be on the train out of my camp and going to somebody who might actually give you honest service. I think we do those kind of things. That's the way we can help change the atmosphere a bit in Washington. All right, go back this way. Yes, sir, right on the aisle.
Thank you, Governor, for being here.
My pleasure.
I want to vote for you. I want the word out, and I want to encourage you to keep fighting. And I know you're a fighter, and it's so discouraging to watch that last, what they called a debate, and watch the media twist things. And so I don't really have a question. I'll give it to a more intelligent person.
All right.
But I really want you to keep fighting because you have the message that can resonate instead of these pretenders at the top of the current polls who don't know, have near the knowledge that you have.
Well, heck, I appreciate that commercial. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Here's the hardest thing to learn in politics. The hardest thing, patience. Really hard. See, because when you're running for president, it is the center of your life. It takes up almost all your time. And not only the time when you're actually out doing stuff like this, but when I go back to the hotel tonight, I'm laying on the bed with ESPN on, I'm going to be thinking about this. It occupies all your time. And when it does, you want things to happen like this. See, the problem is, it's not the center of your life. It's not the center of his life. It's not the center of her life. It's part of it, but not the center of it. So what's that have to do with patience? I got to wait for you to make up your mind. And sometimes, they're polling everybody every 15 minutes, right? And so, everybody's this micro-analysis of who's up and who's down and who's doing well and who isn't. When we know that in the last poll I saw, over 70% of New Hampshire residents said they have not yet made up their mind. Patience. So, am I going to fight? Let me tell you, I will fight hard, and I will work hard. I've been in New Hampshire 45 days now. That is much more than any other candidate has been to this state. And I will be here even more between now and February 9th. Because I believe if I get in front of you and I get to answer your questions and you get to hear me, I get a decent shot at getting your vote. And I've been elected twice as a conservative Republican in New Jersey. Man, if I get on that stage, Hillary Clinton's got a handful, everybody. An absolute handful. She don't want to see me on that stage for a minute. All right. Let's go. This guy's had his hand up for a while. Let's go to him.
You talk a lot about the costs of inaction when it comes to Middle East and American foreign policy, but the rise of ISIS can be directly traced to resentment over American imperialism and intervention in the Middle East. So why are you so interested in shooting down planes in Syria or kicking Assad out when the last time we created a power vacuum in the Middle East, it only created more problems?
Okay, so are you interested in keeping Assad there while he's murdering 250,000 of his people? You raised the issue, so I'd like to ask you. So genocide of 250,000 Syrians is something that the American people should say, not our problem.
Absolutely not. I'm saying.
Okay, well then what do we do?
Given that you're interested in intervening in Syria, what would be your plan for creating a state after that?
Well, first
and
of
not
all,
leading to the lessons of Iraq.
Yeah, first of all, what I'm interested in doing in Syria is empowering the people who are trying to fight their own government and setting up a no-fly zone to protect those folks from Assad and his superior government paid for, taxpayer paid for, military is something that kind of at least goes towards trying to level the playing field so it's a fair fight. I have no interest in going into Syria and establishing a government. What I have an interest in is giving the people who are tired of being repressed and murdered by a dictator who's corrupt and immoral, I want to give them a shot to win. That's what I want to do. And the rise of ISIS being tied, because I don't want to leave this unresponded to American imperialism, it's quite a statement. I think what the rise of ISIS is tied to is radical Islam and the desire of ISIS to impose upon everyone in the world not only their religion, but their interpretation of their religion, which I believe is perverse and violent. They are running around the Middle East beheading Christians for the reason that they're Christians. What's that got to do with American imperialism? That's a holy war by ISIS. And so, I think Christians should be able to practice Christianity. I think Muslims should be able to practice their religion. I think Jews should be able to freely practice their religion as they see fit. You know who disagrees with me? ISIS. We're the great infidels because we don't believe what they believe. I don't care what they believe. Go and practice whatever you want to practice. Just don't act in a violent manner to impose your will on others. ISIS wants to do that. This has nothing to do with American imperialism. It has to do with their goal to impose an Islamic state on the rest of the world. And I got to tell you the truth. I don't want to live in an Islamic state. And I don't want you to either. Because I want the women in this audience to continue to be educated. I want them to be able to live their lives freely, to be able to have a husband that they want to have, not one that's assigned to them. I'd like them to have children, and as many as they want, not a certain number, less or more. I want them to be able to have every opportunity that a man in society has. You know who disagrees with me? ISIS. So we can talk about American imperialism, which is a great college phrase, but what I really want to talk about what we got to learn is that these issues are a lot more complicated than just that, and a lot more nuanced than just that. And so from my perspective, did America make mistakes in Iraq? You bet we did. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what we know today, I wouldn't have gone into Iraq. But that should not hamstring us or dictate to us what our policy is going to be regarding a whole different set of people and a whole different set of problems. The same way we went into Afghanistan to rout al-Qaeda and stop it from being a nest for training and preparation for terrorist attacks, we need to get to the same business with ISIS. Because if we don't, we're going to see some ramifications, I believe, on our own homeland. And if we do, we're all going to be talking about something very different than we're talking about today. So I understand your point of view and respect it. I just don't agree with it. But thanks for asking the question. The young lady right back there.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, so I'm a Jersey girl too.
All right.
Yeah.
I love the sweatshirt. Restore the shore.
Yeah.
Thank you for wearing it.
I hear a lot of people talking about you on the street, and a lot of people, when they hear that I'm a Christie supporter, a lot of commonplace, everyday kind of people have this fear that you're aggressive, somewhat aggressive and intimidating nature at a domestic level when applied to a national level, when dealing with entities such as ISIS and when dealing with overseas threats is going to lead to more violence than is necessary of the American people and more terrorist threats in the future.
First of all, you're from New Jersey, right? What town?
Cranford.
Cranford. Beautiful Union County. I used to have a house in Cranford. That's where our first house was. 515 Elm Street.
Oh, wow.
Corner of Elm and Centennial. You know where that is, on the south side of town, right? Yeah. It didn't work out great for my wife and I. We used to call it Nightmare on Elm Street at that house. But we love Cranford. Here's what you tell the people on the street when they say that to you. You let them know you know me. You see me as governor. You let them know how warm and huggable and lovable I am. And you let them know that, when you're going to be an effective leader, you got to have more than one club in your bag. You know, what the media shows on me most of the time is when I have the driver out, you know, taking a big swing with a big club and trying to hit it a long way. But, you know, when I get within 40 yards of the green, I can use the pitching wedge also. And when I get on the green, I can use the putter. I have different ways of dealing with different problems. And they shouldn't be worried about that, because the most important thing a president will ever have to decide is the issue of sending American military into a conflict. And from talking to presidents who have done it, they've said that they feel a personal responsibility for every death. You don't do that lightly, and I would never do it lightly. But I also will not let America be walked on. And I will not leave to my children and our grandchildren a lesser nation with lesser influence in the world. So we got to pick and choose our spots. I don't want to be the world's policeman. Believe me, I have no interest. What I want to be is the world's leader. And when you see the conflict that's going on right now in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, martial law in Egypt, Ukraine, Crimea, this is what a post-American world would look like. A world where America has pulled away its influence from the world, and that vacuum's created, and bad actors fill that vacuum. Mullahs in Iran, Putin in Moscow. Bad folks, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who want to do nothing but dominate the world and not have freedom and liberty for folks like we want, but to have their system imposed upon folks. So when you see those folks on the street, you just tell them, you know, there's a lot more than meets the eye initially. Tell them to go watch the video on drug addiction. That doesn't look like a guy who's angry and tending to be violent. I'm not. Never have been. Last thing you tell them is I'm a lover, not a fighter. That'll convince them, I'm sure, especially coming from you. That great smile, you'll definitely convince them. Thanks for raising the issue, though. Yes, ma'am, right there.
Since your talk is tell it like it is, I want to be up front and say I'm a Democrat.
Good for you.
Trader here.
Good for
I wanted
you.
to come out and personally thank you for your words on addiction the other day. It moved me. And I have to say, for me to be moved by Christie is a novel idea.
Miracles right here on earth, everybody. Thank you.
It's true. I think it resonated with the American people in a big way, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate it as an extension of your pro-life ideas. But the question I do have is Republicans often have the exception for rape and incest on a pro-life platform. And that's your position, correct, Governor?
It is.
Yeah.
And life of the mother.
Yeah, and life of the mother, right. And my question always is, how does that work out for a rape victim? Considering it takes 2 years, approximately, if ever, to prosecute a rape crime, who decides when abortion is allowed in the case of rape? Is it the cops, the prosecutor, the judges, the police, the woman? Who decides?
Listen, I think that if we see in this country, I know it takes 2 years for a conviction, but there's often evidence that's available immediately afterwards. Rape kits are done. And I understand you're making the nuance of whether or not it was consensual or it was non-consensual. I doubt that most women would come forward and claim they were raped if they weren't. I know it happens at times.
Yeah, very rarely.
But I know it happens at times, but I don't believe that it's a frequent occurrence, and I don't believe it's something that we should dictate policy over as an exception rather than a rule. So that's the way I would do it.
Okay.
I take a woman's word for it.
Okay, so, but the logical extension of the argument, this is what always puzzles me.
Here we go.
It's if you make these exceptions, okay, the logical extension is that we want to amend Roe v. Wade to be pro-life, correct? I mean,
Yes.
at least on state level.
Yes. I at least want to give the state. I want to give the states the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and to only have these exceptions of rape, incest, and life of the mother. And I'm
Correct.
Catholic. I was, born and raised with this philosophy. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But the logical extension is, when does this occur? I mean, who gets to decide?
The state legislatures.
The woman is pregnant for 9 months, and the rape occurrence,
hold
the
on.
prosecution can take 2
Listen,
years.
no. We're going back to, you're twisting this around. We're going back to the idea that if a woman says that she's been raped, I'm going to take the woman's word for it. Okay. It doesn't take 9 months for her to figure that out, right? And so my point is, I'm saying...
So it's her choice.
No. It's not, because it's not her choice. Let's not twist this around now and have fun, okay? Because you're trying to get me to say stuff that then people will take a clip of and do something different. Not her choice. It's what is the facts. And a rape kit is taken if the woman comes immediately forward after the incident or soon thereafter, goes to a hospital or a healthcare provider, rape kit can be done. And there's certain evidence that exists to prove rape that is objective evidence in addition to any testimonial evidence that exists. What I'm saying to you is that women deserve the benefit of the doubt on that. It's not their choice. It's either it happened or it didn't. That's not a choice. And that's why it's an exception, because it wasn't a choice. And it should be an act of self-defense to end that pregnancy. That's my view on it. And I'm not going to, get into the nuances of evaluating from a chair in a bar in Dartmouth, a woman's credibility. People on the ground will assess that. But my inclination would be that a woman who comes forward and claims that something as traumatic as rape happened to her should be given the benefit of the doubt, unless, for these purposes, not for the purposes of conviction of the felon, then it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, because that person has their constitutional rights as well. But in this instance, I think a woman should be given, the benefit of the doubt if there is physical evidence to back it up.
Thank you. I very appreciate that answer.
You're welcome. All right. This guy right here. And then after this, I can take one more, I'm being told by my staff, which means maybe I'll take two.
Governor, am I live here? Yeah,
You're
great.
live.
Governor Christie, thanks so much for coming. Wanted to touch on one thing that surprisingly hasn't come up yet, which is healthcare. We had a somewhat ironically named Affordable Care Act passed a few years back. And I guess I'm just kind of curious what your perspective is on it. We've seen that enrollment numbers are way below where they need to be for the plan to be solvent moving forwards. On the left, we see Hillary Clinton basically talking about just kicking out tax credits, which won't actually solve the problem and will just garner votes. On the right, we see a lot of kind of emotional calls for repealing it. I guess I'm curious, are you more on the side of repealing it completely and trying to implement a new law? Or do you think there are ways to effectively substantively improve the law beyond what the Democrats have been talking about?
I think the major flaw with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is that it's a federal system at all. I think that's the major problem with it. See, here's the thing. Let's look at the two states that I'm now becoming most familiar with, my home state of New Jersey and my second home state of New Hampshire. We both are about the same size from a landmass perspective, roughly speaking. You have 1.3 million people here in New Hampshire. I have 8.9 million people in New Jersey. Why would anyone think that one healthcare system could address the problems and the challenges of a state of this size with 1.3 million people versus a state of my size with 8.9 million people? Let's take New Hampshire, for example. Most of your problems of access to healthcare, many of them, surround distance. People who don't have specialist types of healthcare that are relatively close, they have to travel long distances either within New Hampshire or outside of New Hampshire to go and get that care. Let me tell you, in New Jersey, that's not our problem. We trip over a hospital about every 4 miles in New Jersey. They're everywhere. We don't have a problem with that. Our problem is cost, because the cost of living down there is so expensive and it relates to healthcare even more. So why would we think that a system created federally could deal with the New Hampshire problem and the New Jersey problem? Here's what I'm for. Repeal Obamacare and require each state, within 1 year to come up with their own plan. A New Hampshire plan, a New Jersey plan, a Wyoming plan, a Montana plan. Because each one of those states have unique challenges and opportunities. And they should be able to come up with it. The other reason you're going to want to do that is because it makes this whole solution closer to you. You try to change something at the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, God bless you, good luck. No chance. Now, the same way we trip over hospitals in New Jersey, you folks trip over state reps in New Hampshire. I mean, they're everywhere. You got 400 of them. Every time I go to someplace, like, this is a state rep, I'm a former state rep, former state rep. Like, hey, great to see all of you. The good news about you, or that for you, is that, like in most state governments, you have great access to your state decision makers. So I think it should be a state-based system, and those folks should determine it. And lastly, it's a philosophical reason too. You know, there is a 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which says that if the power to do this is not enumerated in this document, it reverts to the states. Well, I've read the Constitution really closely. I'm sure some of you have too. I don't see health care in there. I don't see it. It's not there. It's a state problem, and the states should fix it. We have a great system. We're the United States of America. And you bet, and we need to understand, it's also in the 10th Amendment. And the fact is, we need to make sure in our country that we continue to respect the rights of the states and utilize them. And I trust governors and legislatures to make these decisions, because you got a better chance of kicking one of us out than you do kicking out anybody from the federal government. So let me take one more. I will do that. Let's go over here. Yeah, how about you?
Hi, Governor Christie. Thank you for coming. I'm really glad to be here.
What's your name?
Caitlin. And my question is, how do we make education better for students?
How old are you, Caitlin? What grade are you in? 11. What grade are you in? 5th grade. All right. How do we make education better for students? How about a few things? First off, I think that the most important person in your education beside you is your parents, right? And so we need to have your parents to have more ability to influence and choose how you want to be educated, what they think is best for you. I remember when we decided to send our oldest son to Catholic school in the 7th grade. And he wasn't enthusiastic about going. And he thought maybe he wouldn't get admitted. And then the letter came and he had been admitted. And he went up to his room and he cried. This is, by the way, the senior at Princeton now. So I'm sure he loves me telling this story. But he went up to his room and cried. And he came back downstairs angry. And he said, "It's my life. Don't I have a choice of where I go to school?" And I said, "No, you don't. Not now. You get to make choices when you get older. Now, we get to choose." I think parents need to be more involved in their child's education and choosing what the best education is for them. And for us, giving them the opportunity, the freedom, regardless of their economic circumstances, to be able to make that choice. Whether it's public school, where I went to school my entire life. You'll tell who made decisions in our house, who makes decisions in our house. I went to public school from kindergarten to 12th grade. My wife went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade. Our 4 children go to Catholic school. So, you know, she makes the calls on this stuff, but one of us should. I think your parents need to have more freedom to make those choices. Second, I think we need to stop teaching like we're still in the 19th century. Most classrooms today look exactly like they looked in the 19th century. Rows of desks, facing front, one person standing in front, a whiteboard or a blackboard, some chalk or markers, and away we go. We got to do much better than that. The technology we have today, do you have a big backpack you carry to school every day? With lots of books in it? Really heavy? Yeah? I think you should have an iPad. And I think all your books should be on an iPad, so that you can download the most current version of that book. Not an old book that maybe has been hanging around for 3 or 4 years, the most current version of the book. And you should carry that iPad around every day, and that should be the only thing that you have to carry along with a notebook. That's it. That's all you need to do. We need to use the technology that's available to us now to be able to make your education more current to you. Not something old and stodgy, but current. And to use the tools that you've become so used to using. I don't have my cell phone with me, but if I did, I'm sure you could work it a heck of a lot better than I can. And so can my kids. They've evolved into a new way of learning, and we're not catching up with them. Third, we got to demand quality in the classroom. Every kid in the classroom should have a good teacher. And good teachers in this country don't ever worry about being evaluated. And they, quite frankly, don't care much about tenure. Because they know that if you have a good teacher in the front of your classroom, you carry that teacher around on your shoulders, man. They are worth their weight in gold to you. The teachers' unions in this country spend more time, money, and energy protecting the worst of them than they do protecting the best. It's absolutely true. And in my opinion, they have become a destructive force on education in this country. How about this in New Jersey? I had a guy recently in one of our public schools, who was late to school, the teacher, over the course of 2 years, over 100 times. over 100 times. The school district moved to fire him after many warnings. They fired him, the union came in and protected him, and the arbitrator gave him his job back and said, while it's unacceptable he came late, we don't think it's a fireable offense. Well, what is it? We're gonna put him in the corner? We're gonna send him to the board and write, I won't be late again 100 times? Like, what do we, no, he's an adult. He should show up for work on time. He should be fired. Yet the unions and the craziness of the unions in this country have allowed a guy like that to stay in a classroom. In the city of Newark, I've got teachers who sit in a conference room every day and read the newspaper because we can't fire them, but we can't let them be in the classroom either because they're so lousy. Insanity that's driven by the system. So what you deserve is to have a teacher who's interested in being there, who's working hard, who's qualified to teach you, and who wants you to do well. And we can do that, and we can even pay them more. But we got to get rid of the lousy ones and get rid of tenure. Teacher tenure should not be part of the K-12 system. It just shouldn't be. No one's getting fired for their views of algebra. Okay? And this is just a system that now says if you keep a job for 3 years, you keep it for life. I'm sure any one of you would like that deal in here. I have a good first 3 years. I got it for the rest of my life. Craziness. It never happened. Last thing I'd tell you is this. What you learn in school every day should be decided by your local school board, not by some folks in Washington, D.C. doing something like Common Core. Shouldn't be done. Because if you start bringing that stuff home and you're doing your homework with your mom or your dad, and they start seeing stuff that you're being taught that they're saying, this doesn't make sense. This is contrary to our values. This gives us some concern. They should be able to get up, go to the next school board meeting, and air their views. But if that thing's being decided in Washington, D.C., that becomes a much bigger problem for them. So education that's kept closest to you and to your parents will be the education that will be best and most responsive to you. And the last thing is, don't forget about this. It's your responsibility too. Got to do your homework. Got to study hard. Got to pay attention in class. And you got to make sure that you understand each and every day when you go to school that you'll be given an opportunity in your life to do something really good. Now, you know, some days you're not going to be up for it. I get it. I go to work some days I'm not completely up for it. But you got to give your best every day. Whatever your best is that day, give that. Some days will be better than others. But give your best every day. You'll be a big part of it too. So that's the way I would help to improve education in the country. And Caitlin, thank you for your question. I appreciate it very much. All right. Two things before I let you go to your weekend. First is to say thank you. Really, thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate it. Overwhelmed by the number of people who are here. Love the questions that were asked. All of them were really good questions. And I appreciate you all coming and asking me those questions. I tell people whenever they get cynical, skeptical about American democracy, which we all have a right to do sometimes, I say to those folks, come to New Hampshire. Because the people here take your responsibility really seriously to vet who the next president of the United States is going to be. And I thank you for being a part of this operation tonight and doing what you need to do, not only for you to decide who you're going to vote for, but also to help our country. Incredibly important. Last thing I'll tell you is that this is my 32nd town hall meeting in New Hampshire on my 45th day in New Hampshire. And I got yelled at by a guy, and it was either my 4th or 5th town hall meeting. He came up to me after the town hall meeting, and he said to me, I'm upset with you. I said, okay, sir, what did I do? And he said, you forgot to do something. Very important. You came to New Hampshire, you forgot to do something. I said, okay, what did I forget to do? He said, I love what you said on all the issues. I agree with you. And he said, but I'm not going to vote for you. I said, why not? He said, because of what you forgot to do. I said, all right, enough, man. What did I forget to do? And he said, you never asked me for the vote. Never asked. He said, you did 2 hours with me, and I'm waiting for the moment you're going to say, and can I have your vote? I want your support. I want your vote. And you never did it. So you're not getting my vote. And I said, can I have your vote? And he said, too late. He said, I'll come back another time and see if you've gotten better. So he said, as he was walking away, he walked away after saying he was going to come back and see if I could do better. And then he turned back around and he looked at me and he said, remember something, son, that's the way we do things in New Hampshire. So, I've never made that mistake again. I not only want your vote, and I do, and I'm asking you for your vote, but also I want your support and your trust. Because if all I get is your vote, I can't be an effective president. That just gets me there. Your support and your trust is what will empower me to do something once I get there. And so I'm expanding on the New Hampshire tradition as told to me by that young gentleman. I'm not only asking for your vote, I'm asking for your trust and for your support. And if I can earn that over the course of the next 90 days or so, and I could do really well in this New Hampshire primary, then I will be the guy standing on that stage next September against Hillary Clinton. And I will make a promise to you. If you support me and vote for me now and you give me that chance, you're going to be really proud of what I'm going to do on that stage next September. I will bring it. I will prosecute the case against her and her vision for this country. And after we win the election, we won't worry about making America great again. America's already great. America's not great because of the government. America's not great because of any particular leader. America is great because of the American people, because of what you do every day and our fellow citizens do every day. That's the greatness I want to unleash again. I want you to feel free every day to do what you believe is right for your family, for your community, for your state, and for your country. And if you feel free and enthusiastic to do that, and I've contributed to that somewhat as president, as a leader, then the greatest days of America definitely are ahead of us. We just got to believe that, and we got to work hard to get there. So thanks for coming tonight and listening to me. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.